What's going on, everyone? It is Thursday, which means we've got one of our final leaders revealed today. We also have, I don't know, 13 cards to talk about outside of that, because there was a Twin Suns gameplay stream the other day where FFG revealed a couple more cards, and we had a bunch of cards drop today and yesterday. So there are just so many things to talk about. Let's not waste any time. Big day to my patrons over on Patreon. Thank you for supporting the channel. And I have a TCG play link in the description down below. Be sure to use it for all your Star Wars Unlimited card needs. I made it real quick today. Let's jump in it and talk about Shadowed Intentions. And wow, that's a little bit zoomed out here today, huh? So this is a 3-cost upgrade. In Cunning, attached unit gains. This unit can't be captured, defeated, or returned by owners to its owner's hand by enemy card ability. So basically, this kind of gives you the TIE Phantom ability. Now, here's what's interesting about this is you could still technically damage the unit by enemy card abilities, but it can't be defeated, captured, or returned. So this doesn't say the complete text box like TIE Phantom does, but it does do some interesting stuff. Okay, so you're able to overwhelming barrage whatever this is attached to for almost its entire HP, but not its entire HP. You can't waylay the unit that this is attached to, which is pretty interesting. Unless, of course, you decided to waylay your own unit with this attached to it, but that's unlikely, right? Because you're trying to keep this on the battlefield. So what does this actually do? You could still defeat it in combat. So any unit combat will still cause this to fall off, and you could still kill that unit, which is a big thing to consider. A lot of people consider this and oh, it's basically unkillable. Not quite, because one of the biggest ways that you oftentimes get your units killed is through other units attacking it. Here's where it gets interesting, is if you had a Chirrut. Let's say you were playing Chirrut yellow. Not saying that that's an amazing strategy, but let's say you were, just for a moment. Okay, you go ahead and pump up your Chirrut. You put Shadowed Intentions on it. Suddenly, it can't be defeated by Rival's Fall. Okay, interesting. Let's say you have a General Grievous, and you wanted to go all your lightsabers on your General Grievous. You put Shadowed Intentions on it. Suddenly, it can't be defeated by Rival's Fall, Fell the Dragon. It can't be waylaid, which is a really important thing because you're putting all these lightsabers on it. It can't be captured, which is really relevant. The only realistic way to deal with it is either by No Good to Me Dead, exhausting it every turn, or going ahead and just killing it with unit combat. That makes some Voltron strategies, the idea of putting a bunch of stuff on one unit, kind of interesting to me. I don't think it's that great of a card because it's 3 resources just to get this ability. And you first have to get the 3 resources, attach it to whatever unit you want to, have that unit live to the point where you can attach another thing to it. And if you do it in the reverse area, well, let's say you attach, I don't know, a lightsaber or something. Well, they could waylay in response before you get Shadowed Intentions down. So you have to play this first, then start pumping up your thing. I think it's going to be rare to where this actually is going to be good, especially with effects like No Good to Me Dead, because No Good to Me Dead is extremely powerful, it's extremely cheap, and it's extremely prevalent throughout basically all villainy cunning decks. That just absolutely hoses this overall strategy, because again, you could still exhaust it, you just can't defeat it or return or capture it with enemy card ability. So kind of an interesting one, giving a TIE Phantom passive essentially to a unit. Next up, though, we got to talk about our brand new leader. We got Nala Se. She's a Vigilance Villainy leader. Ignore the aspect penalty on clone units you play. So first off, this card is very reminiscent of Hera, except way better, not even close comparatively, okay? It has a similar ability. It's just a matter of 8 to 9 cards versus 30, right? So these are the units with clone in somewhere in its text box. So we have Infantry of the 212th, Echo, Republic Tactical Officer. We've got Coruscant Guard. We got Captain Rex, 501st Liberator, Clone Commander Cody. We have Clone itself, Soldier of the 501st, Clone Heavy Gunner Jesse, Batch Brothers Heavy. We've got the where is it? Fives. 332nd Stalwarts, all the bad batch members. So we got Echo, Wrecker, Tack, Crosshair, Omega. And we also have Wolf from set 1, as well as Clone Deserter. So a lot of different options here in terms of units that you could play. Now, I say way better than Hera. Hera's not good to begin with, okay? this I don't think is a very strong ability for any leader, okay? Even though I think this is way better than Hera, I still don't think it's good. She does flip for 4 resources, and she does have a 1/7 stat line, so extremely tanky for 4 resources, but very low power. And she gives something interesting. She makes it so each clone unit that dies heals 2 damage from your base. Again, this doesn't do anything unless you're explicitly using clone units. In fact, the whole leader doesn't really do anything. It's kind of interesting if you compare all your clones that are typically heroism. Like if you look at all the different clone units, most of them are heroism: Omega, Wrecker, Echo, Republic Commando, 332nd Stalwart. Like most of these are heroism units, but you can play in a vigilance villainy deck. And mind you, you could play like other aspects. Like if you wanted to go double blue to play vigilance itself, you could, and you'd have a lot of options to choose from. Here's the problem: clones typically are Republic based, so you kind of want that Republic synergy. Granted, you'll have a lot of Republic synergy because you're using a bunch of clones, but some events that refer to Republic and other cards that are outside of the clones that refer to Republic typically won't be able to be used because they are heroism cards. So I don't think it really pairs well overall. And I don't think this stat line, if it was a 2/7, maybe with Restore 2, I'd be a little bit more excited. I don't think the heal 2 damage from your base from clone units is all that exciting. I could see some sort of token strategy with it, but most of the token generators are outside of clone traded things, right? Because this refers to the clone units. So you can't use like events that have a clone tag. If they did, I don't think they do, but if they did have it, then that's not really relevant. I think this card is pretty bad. The only thing that I could see it being kind of interesting is if you play like ECL and suddenly you get to ECL some powerful clone units like Wrecker. But is that good enough for a weak leader? Like, are you literally playing Nalase just to play Wrecker in your Vigilance control deck, Vigilance command villainy deck? I don't think so. So not extremely powerful, but maybe there's something there. I don't know. This is like Hera tier for me, guys. I think she's way better than Hera, but I think Hera is like absolute garbage. So I think this is just like garbage. On to the next one. We got Reprocess, new event in command villainy. Choose up to 4 units in your discard pile, put them on the bottom of your deck in a random order, and create that many battle droid tokens. Kind of interesting, because if you think about it, this could potentially be a 3 resource create 4 battle droid tokens, right? That's pretty good. That's pretty good, especially in decks that are looking for battle droid tokens. The problem is you're not going to be able to do this on turn 2 most of the time, because you'll need 4 units in your discard pile. On average, you're going to see 4 units in your discard pile by turn 4 or 5 or 6. So what I'm thinking about this card is you go into the early game, you're playing your battle droid escorts, you're playing whatever you're playing in your exploit deck, you sacrifice, you exploit cards out, suddenly those units are now in your discard pile, assuming you use some real units, not just battle droid tokens. You trade off, they remove it, whatever. You reprocess, you exploit out a bunch of things on the same turn, right? When you have like 6 to 7 resources, you reprocess, you get to put a bunch of things on the bottom of your deck, you get some battle droid tokens, you exploit those battle droid tokens, you use the leftover resources for maybe doing something else, and suddenly you got some pretty big board state. That's where I think reprocess is. I don't think it's a full 3 of, I think it's more of like a 1 or 2 of in your exploit deck because of that, because you're not going to have infinite units in your discard pile, but I think it does have some potential there. Next up, we got Patrolling AAT. We've got 5 resource ground units in villainy, 4/5 separatist vehicle tank sentinel. Pretty straightforward, pretty below average stat line. There are a lot of 5 resource, 4 resource, 6 resource sentinels, and I think the 5 resource slot is the most awkward because the 6 resource tends to give you more options and a lot better ones. And also on the 4 resource slot, you have things like Chilton, who's a 6/6, right? 4 resource 6/6 in Vigilance. Granted, this is in villainy and it has the separatist tag, but this 4/5 sentinel is pretty base level unit. I mean, this is going to be extremely powerful for draft, and I think it's going to be pretty mediocre outside of that. You can't exploit it out for any reason, unless, of course, you're playing like Count Dooku, right? Which maybe this is good enough in Count Dooku. Does have the separatist tag. I think that could be relevant. A 4/5, I just think is a very poor stat line. If you're looking at the 5 resource units that we have, they are just dwarfing this in stat line. But also some 4 resource plays actually perform really well in the Patrolling AAT, so I don't think this is a very strong card at all. Grievous Reassembly, 2-cost event in Vigilance, 3 heal 3 damage from a unit to create a battle droid token. This is kind of like a repair, but for initial resource, you get a battle droid token. I am not extremely impressed with this. I think the decks that are looking for battle droid tokens are not going to want to be healing up their units, because the whole point is to continuously reassemble better units with the exploit mechanic. And the fact that this doesn't also say 3 damage from a base means that you're really unexcited about it. And also, if you compare it to one of the other heal 3 damage from a unit events in Covert Strength, I think this really matches up poorly against it, because the experience is usually way more valuable than a battle droid token. Again, the battle droid tokens, the places that it'll be valuable in, they don't really want this effect. So I'm not really impressed by this. Maybe some sort of draft card, maybe an option if you're playing Grievous, because flavor win, hello. But outside of that, not extremely impressed. Next up, we got Clear the Field. Love this, by the way. Love this art. And absolutely love this card. 2-cost event in Cunning Heroism. Choose a non-leader unit that costs 3 or less. Return it and each enemy non-leader unit with the same name as it to their owner's hands. So realistically, this is a 2-resource waylay or spare the target, but it only targets 3 cost or less units. So it actually could do some major work in certain decks, because oftentimes there are situations where you are waylaying on turn 2. And this is just 1 cheaper. Now, I don't think this is what you're going to be playing it for. Like, I don't think you replace your spare the targets in waylays for this. The universality of waylay and spare the targets are way better. Like, I would 100% be main decking those over Clear the Field. What this does do is clear the field of tokens. Battle droid tokens, clone trooper tokens, it just returns it all and kills them, right? Because they're tokens. So if your opponent is playing a token deck, if token decks are meta, this is a full 3 of sideboard card in any Cunning Heroism deck. This just one side board wipes your entire opponent. If your opponent goes reprocessing and you clear the field, suddenly you've traded up on resources, you've made that effect completely gone, because they can no longer, reuse units from their discard pile because they're at the bottom of the deck, and suddenly you've cleared 4 battle droid tokens for 2 resources. That's crazy. Okay, clone trooper tokens even better, because they're better tokens, right? Your opponent plays a Batch Brothers, your opponent's like creating manufacturing, supply manufacturing or something like that. I don't know. It's a 3 resource double command card, creates 2 clone trooper tokens. Suddenly they get 3 clone trooper tokens. You pay 2 resources, you clear them all. It completely negates the coordinate strategy. This card is really powerful as a sideboard option. So if token decks are good, this is going to be an absurd sideboard card. Next up, we got Daughter of Dathomir. 4-cost ground unit in Vigilance, 3/5 with the Force tag. It also has the Night tag, so we might be seeing a Night Sister some point. We didn't see too many Night Sisters. We haven't seen a Night Sister leader yet either. But while this unit is undamaged, it gains Restore 2. So 4-resource 3/5 with Restore 2 is actually interesting to me. 3/5 is not a terrible stat line. It is definitely a decent chunk below average, but it at least survives a lot of the 4-resource plays. Like, there's a lot of 4/4s, 4/5s that this goes toe-to-toe with in terms of 2 attacks, which is nice. And the Restore 2 can be relevant. Now, when you think about it, though, you have things like Sundari Peacekeeper, which are essentially 3/5 Restore 2s as well. The thing that I think this needs in order to actually be playable is some sort of Force synergy. So if you're playing Force throws, you're playing a Force deck, maybe you're playing Daughter of Dathomir because of the Force tag. The Night tag doesn't have any relevance right now. Maybe in the future we'll see some sort of Night Sister synergy, and this card is going to be a staple in that because there's not too many of them. I don't know, but I don't think it's good enough just to play as a 4-resource 3/5 Restore 2, because it's not just Restore 2, period. It has to be undamaged, which can be a little bit tricky sometimes. So if you're abusing the Force tag, maybe, but even then is a little bit risky because you have a lot of Force units that are really good now with set 3. So not a huge fan of this card. I think it's pretty weak, but I suppose we will see. Next up, we got Heavy Persuader tank, 7-cost ground unit in Aggression, 6/5 Exploit 2 Separatist Droid Vehicle tank. Lots of traits there. Lots of stuff I just said. When played, you may deal 2 damage to a ground unit. So I really like these when played effects in my Exploit cards, because Exploit is all about trading in early game plays for 1 big mid-game play by setting it up with battle droid tokens. The problem with that is that if your opponent you're consolidating all these resources into 1 card, Your opponent has a Fellow Dragon, a Rival's Fall, a Takedown in Heavy Persuader's tank's case. They just traded like one card for multiple turns of your resources and your card, which really stinks. So anytime you get value immediately is much, much better. And Heavy Persuader tank, it does give you a little bit, 2 damage to a ground unit. I don't think it's extremely powerful. I think this is on the weaker side. Yes, you can get it down for 3 resources on turn like, 2, 3, whatever. You play, I don't know, the Droid Manufacturing, create 2 Battle Droid tokens turn 1. Turn 2, you get a 6/5, and you get to deal 2 damage to something. It could be interesting, right? Killing a unit or maybe doing enough damage to where something else could kill it. I just don't think the card is strong enough to be playing this exploit card over others. Also, aggression's a little bit odd. I feel like vigilance and command are more of the exploit colors, but there is also cunning and aggression options, and maybe that fits better in that type of deck. Next up, we got Strategic Acumen, 1 cost upgrade in command. Attach unit gains, play a unit from your hand. It costs 1 less as an action, exhaust, +0, +2. So it's kind of interesting. It kind of gives you your Alliance Dispatcher type effect on a unit, any unit that you want. And what's interesting about this also is that it replaces itself. And what I mean by that is not in cards, but in resources. So let's say you go turn 1, you play a unit. Let's say it's an R2-D2. And on that turn, you play a Strategic Acumen on R2-D2. Suddenly, your R2-D2 is a 1/6, and it has this effect. That can be interesting. 1/6s are really tough to kill. You're not going to be killing that until maybe turn 4, turn 3, turn 4-ish, if you put all your resources into it. I suppose your opponent could be like, I don't know, Sabine Yellow, play a Battlefield Marine, surprise strike it, suddenly you've lost Strategic Acumen and your R2. But I think you're okay with that because your opponent has now traded essentially 2 cards for your, or a card and some damage for your 2 cards, which is probably okay. It's not great for you by any means, but it's not like the worst thing ever. But that is kind of interesting to me. And then you could play a unit afterwards. Like if you are on a better resource turn, you play this, you use the action on that unit, and then you get to play something else, and it kind of didn't cost anything. I don't think it's particularly strong by any means. Any upgrade that requires you to play the upgrade, then use an action is a little bit tough in Star Wars Unlimited. I just think it's kind of interesting with a couple 1-drops because it does give +0, +2. So if you do have a 1 resource play and then play this on turn 1, you do kind of build your own Alliance Dispatcher, but it's going to be an Alliance Dispatcher that is going to live like Luke can, right? Because he can put a shield token on it. Next up, we got Resolute, a new capital ship in Heroism. It's a 10-cost space unit in Aggression Heroism. It's an 8/8 Republic vehicle capital ship. And, of course, this is Anakin's capital ship, which is absolutely sweet. This unit costs 1 less to play for every 5 damage on your base. When played on attack, deal 2 damage to an enemy unit and each other enemy unit with the same name as that unit. So very similar to the Clear the Field earlier, where you get to kind of wipe Battle Tree tokens or Clone Trooper tokens off the field. But the thing I'm looking at is how much are you realistically going to be playing this for? Let's say you have 20 damage on your base. Well, you get a 4 resource discount. It's a 6 resource 8/8 that deals 2 damage when it comes into play and on attack. That's a pretty decent unit. I would definitely be playing that, especially in space. The problem is you have 20 damage on your base. Is this actually going to prevent you from dying? Not really. If you think about like Ruthless Raider, which is a 6 resource 4/6 in space that deals 2 damage to an enemy unit and an enemy base, the point of that is to get the damage to enemy base. It's not actually to clear the board. If this had Sentinel, maybe, because it would actually provide a blockade in space. If this had some sort of more powerful effect, like 3 damage to an enemy unit or all enemy units in ground arena, maybe. But again, it's not really helping you live in those arenas. So I'm not really convinced that this is going to be a decent finisher. Realistically, if you're playing this for 7 resources, I also don't think it's that bad. You have 15 damage on your base. Maybe that's a little bit of a better spot. 8 resources, you start to see an 8 resource 8/8 space unit that deals 2 damage. I'm less excited about that. There's better options, generally speaking. Like I think I would prefer Redemption in that case as a better option at that stage in the game, but maybe it has a place there as a decent finisher. 9 resources, well, now we're getting to Crate Dragon territory. I think I would just prefer Crate Dragon. 10 resources, well, you probably are winning the game if you're getting a 10 resources with 0 damage on your base, right? Same thing goes with 9 and 8 resources, I suppose. 10 and 5 damage when you're getting to that stage in the game, you're probably in a winning position if you're playing that style of deck. So realistically, I think if you got 20 damage on your base, if you're playing a 30 HP base, you're really still pretty close to death. If you're playing ECL or anything else, you're like barely surviving. And I don't think this is going to allow you to actually come back in that game. So I'm not sure about Resolute. I think you have some potential in that 7 resource range for more mid-range decks for 15 damage on your base. I think it might have potential there. And maybe if you're able to control the board enough to where you can deploy this at 20 damage on your base and you can actually get a couple attacks into it, maybe something there as well. Next up, we got In Defense of Kamino, brand new 4-cost event in Command. For this phase, each friendly Republic unit gains Restore 2, and when defeated, create a Clone Trooper token. So, this basically gives all of your Republic units a way to heal 2 on your base and replaces themselves, right, with a Clone Trooper token. Now, I saw some pretty interesting stuff with Chancellor Palpatine, which says anytime a token enters, it enters ready. So you create a Clone Trooper token, you attack. You create another Clone Trooper token, you attack. You create another Clone Trooper token, you attack. As far as I know, in Star Wars Unlimited, that would work because of the way the rules work. If you were to play this card in Magic the Gathering, for example, it would only affect the units that were currently in play as of using this event. Unless it said some sort of specific scenario where when other units enter the battlefield, because it just gives the effect to the units in play. But I believe this should work for Star Wars Unlimited, which is kind of interesting, a little bit of an infinite combo in terms of you just get to basically clear your entire opponent's board and restore a bunch of damage. So if your opponent has like 3 or 4 units, you play this, you attack every single unit that dies, you get a fresh one, and you get to restore 2. So it's pretty powerful, I'll say. But I don't think that's very realistic because it's double cunning for Palpatine. And then either that would cost 6 or Defense of Kamino would cost 6. And I think your opponent would potentially see that coming. Chancellor Palpatine's kind of a card you do want to get rid of. But is it good enough just to play on its own? I'm not super impressed with it. Again, these Clone Trooper tokens enter exhausted. So unless you do have something like Palpatine, you're not getting that instant feedback. So I'm not a huge fan of this card, but I could see some combo potential with Chancellor Palpatine, which is pretty interesting. And I think lastly, is this the last card? Nope, there's one more card after this. Hu Yang. This card I'm actually really excited about. This is a 3-cost ground unit in Command. It's a 2/4 Jedi droid. When played, choose another friendly unit. While this unit is in play, the chosen unit gets +2/+2. That is extremely powerful. Think about it. You're playing your normal Command aggressive deck, and instead of going with the Rebel synergy with Fleet Lieutenant, you go with Hu Yang, and suddenly you kind of get that Fleet Lieutenant effect, right? Because you get the +2/+2, and suddenly that first unit can attack. If you have Battlefield Marine, it's a 5/5. That 5/5 can now kill your opponent's 3 resource play, and generally their 2 resource play isn't going to be able to attack into Hu Yang and kill him immediately, which is really powerful. Of course, if you just want to attack into their base, you get +2/+2, and that's going to transition between turns if you're able to keep Hu Yang alive. Not to mention it has the Jedi tag, so if you want to attach, some people were talking about like General's Blade to this, you suddenly get the discount on any of the unit, and you get to keep Hu Yang alive, which is pretty interesting. I think this is really, really quite interesting. It's also really solid with Sentinels, right? You put a Sentinel up, you put Hu Yang, buff up the Sentinel. Sentinel's stronger, so it kills all their units, and it keeps Hu Yang alive to keep that buff on your Sentinel. I think there's a lot of potential with this card, but I mainly think about it as like a pseudo Fleet Lieutenant. The nice thing about Fleet Lieutenant is that you get to attack in immediately, but this also pumps its toughness so that you're more likely to get an attack in also. So I think there's a decent amount of potential with Hu Yang. I am really impressed with this card. I think it has a lot of potential throughout the entirety of the game. It also has the droid tag, which maybe you're playing a General Grievous deck and you use this as a droid pump effect. I don't know. There's a lot of options I see with relevant tags. An okay stat line. I don't like the 2/4, but it is a 3/4 is usually average. So at least it trades with that over the course of 2 attacks. And it also gives you the pump for whatever unit you played initially. So that's pretty nice. And then lastly, we have Padawan Starfighter. 2-cost space unit in Vigilance. Is a 1/3 Jedi Republic vehicle fighter. Nice tags, by the way. While you control a force unit or a force upgrade, this unit gets +1/+1. So I was kind of curious. I was like, okay, do we have any force upgrades? I don't believe there are any force upgrades that I know of, but there are a lot of force units. If this said for each force unit you control, this unit gets +1/+1, I'd be way more excited about this, because this is a very good chance you'll have 2 or 3 force units within this new set. Here's the problem with it. It's only a +1/+1, so it becomes a 2/4. And you must have a force unit to get that 2/4 space unit for 2 resources. I'm not even that impressed with a 2/4 space unit, okay? And you need to set up a 2/4 space unit. Jedi tag is not that relevant on a space unit. The Force tag or the Republic tag is relevant, but we have other Republic units like Anakin Starfighter, for example, as a 2/3 base. This card looks pretty mediocre to me. Again, if it had multiple options to be pumped, I would be way more interested in this, but it doesn't. So you're just getting a 2/4. Like, that's not a good payoff. If this was like a 2/3 base and then it became a 3/4, or if this was a 1/3 that gave you +1/+1 for each force unit, I could say, oh, maybe we're talking about something, because you can go the type of curve where you go like Ahsoka Tano into, I don't know, Sabine Wren into Plo Koon, and suddenly you got multiple force units on the battlefield, and suddenly this thing gets really, really big, really, really quickly. I could see something going on there, but as it stands currently, I think this card is pretty bad. Overall, guys, let me know what you think about the new cards in Star Wars Unlimited. Guys, Shadowed Intentions, do you see any combo potential, anything cool we can do with that? Nala say, Hera 2.0, slightly better, actually good? Let me know in the comment section down below. Reprocess, I think this is a pretty solid mid-game tool for exploit decks. Patrolling AT, not that strong. Grievous Assembly, kind of mediocre. Clear the Field, arguably one of the best sideboard cards for set 3. Daughter of Damir, will we see more Night Sisters? Heavy Persuader tank, more exploit cards. Strategic Acumen, Resolute, new capital ship. Can we be playing this in our heroism decks in Defense of Kamino? Are we going to go infinite with Chancellor Palpatine? We will have to see. Hu Yang, maybe a new Fleet Lieutenant type effect with the ability to keep your unit around with the pump multiple turns in a row. And Padawan Starfighter, are we going to see any sort of synergy with that to actually make it powerful enough? Let me know in the comment section down below, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all for the next one.